急増チームでチームワーク？
急増でもチームはチームだ。
What makes a Senshado team? In our last Girls on Panzer analysis, we experienced the high of seeing all of Oarai's friends come riding to their aid, turning a completely unwinnable match into something where there might be a chance. However, throwing 30 tanks together doesn't necessarily a team make, as the girls quickly learn when the tide turns against them at the start of the battle, nearly leading to disaster. This week's video is brought to you by another project of mine that I don't talk about enough, my first epic fantasy novel, The Dragon Hand. An ancient evil is returning to threaten the world. At least that's what one of the voices in Saravak's head is telling him. As the only dragon in the kingdom of Altanar, and technically a prisoner of war, Saravak's position as the king's hand via his friendship with the young king is precarious enough before the voice of one of his ancestors warned of the new threat. With the help of two young foreigners, Saravak endeavors to avert disaster. But as evidence of a conspiracy grows, his political enemies close to home may be even more dangerous. The Dragon Hand is book 1 of 3 in a trilogy, and after a long hiatus, I'm finally working on book 2. And I hope to have it out within a year or so. So if you enjoy a more classic type of fantasy adventure, consider checking out The Dragon Hand on Amazon. Now, onto the video. Obviously, some spoilers ahead for their film, so here's your warning. Immediately following the massive high point that was the moment where all of the friends Oarai made along the way came to help, we cut to the inevitable meeting of the minds, as, for better or worse, we've got a team full of team commanders now, each of whom is used to doing things a certain way, with very different mindsets and approaches to things. And now they all need to fight under a single banner, hence the meeting. Something that I assume they were granted prior to the battle properly starting as a formality on account of the unique nature of their team. Fortunately, the Commander Conference pretty quickly gets past the first potential hurdle when they unanimously agree that Miho is in overall command. In the end, this is Oarai's battle after all, and it's important for them not to fight over who's in charge. Well, that doesn't mean they agree on everything, however. There's some contention over who will be the squadron commanders, though Maho puts an end to that quickly, and then the big debate on just how to approach the overall strategy. As you might expect, each of the strong-willed team commanders here wants to fight her own way, forgetting, at least momentarily, that they aren't fighting as just their school and are here under Miho's command. Remember, just like we saw in the first air film battle, where Miho, due to her still lacking self-confidence and her more quiet nature, she had trouble maintaining effective command of her allies. And again we see her relative lack of confidence keep her silent here, as the others metaphorically, and without any malice obviously, run all over her. Though, notably, Maho does not do so. It takes a quiet reminder from Senshado Guru Mika in the back for everyone to remember that they agreed to have Miho in command, and for Miho to reassert herself. Though the initial plan she proposes is fairly simple, basically just dividing the team into 3 units, one primary and the other 2 for support. A very by-the-book approach, which, given the unique situation they find themselves in, might sound good, at least on paper, with probably not a whole lot of time to plan, given that they probably weren't given very long for this meeting before the match formally started, so they go with it at the start. I'll get into the full tactical battle analysis in a separate video, but suffice to say, things don't exactly go according to plan at the start. Actually, that's probably a bit of an understatement. The Oarai team is pretty thoroughly thrashed at the start of the battle. A lot of that is, of course, due to the university team's questionable secret weapon. At least part of it is due to Miho and friends trying to fight a conventional, direct battle against an opponent that completely outclasses them in the type of fight. They might have an even number of tanks, but the Chaffies and Pershings of the university team are overall on average better than the ones Oarai's team has. And their uniform team, with lots of experience working as a unit, is just too well prepared. Plus the fact that they're made up of alumni from some of these schools also gives them insight into the strengths and weaknesses of them, which only adds to the challenge. But a big part of the issue here is, probably the biggest part, and as Maho will point out a little later, is with Miho not fully trusting her instincts, and fighting this battle too conventionally. Trying to make this a straight-up fight almost comes off as Miho being overwhelmed by all the new information and assets that have dropped into her lap, so she defaults to something a little too simple and direct. By contrast, look at what we see of the university team as the battle starts. They're a well-oiled machine, pun intended, and it shows. Their mission briefing is short, professional, and to the point. They have a ready game plan despite the last-minute changes, and they know each other well enough to effectively cooperate and coordinate with no hiccups. They know who they face, are too smart to underestimate them, and have full confidence in each other, thereby making what might look like an even fight on paper not at all even. You also don't need to be directly told things like this. For example, there are no scenes of the university students talking about the Oarai team's clear weaknesses, for example, and we are shown rather than told, from Oarai's point of view, what their initial problems are. So from the first engagement between the teams, we can see the university team is in full control. They have already figured out Oarai's likely first move, and bait them into a vulnerable position. Of course, Miho could not have known about the Carl, and she reasonably advises caution even once they spot the enemy, but that only does so much. Once the calculated university attack begins, the Oarai conglomerate team is thrown into disarray. It doesn't take long after the start of the university attack for Oarai team's command and control to start breaking down, as we see prominently when the Chiatown forces Leroy Jenkins and lose several tanks. Miho remains calm though and tries to keep things orderly, but that only does so much, and even as the Oarai team tries to react to these attacks and respond, and the support for the main group with the heaviest tanks, Sunflower, is pinned down, the purpose of those distractions is revealed, as the Carl opens fire. We definitely don't need to be told that the Oarai conglomerate team is in disarray now. We can see it in the attack on the Saunders tanks, like with how battered some of the tanks that aren't knocked out become, and of course with the Carl bombardment, which immediately takes out 2 tanks and forces the rest into a barely organized withdrawal, during which most of the Pravda tanks, some of Oarai's most powerful tanks, are lost in a scene I've covered more in depth in a previous video. Fortunately for our heroines, they are able to mount a retreat before they get completely rolled up, and that gives them important time to rethink and retool their approach, i.e. they need to fight more like Miho did back in Season 1. It's no coincidence that Oarai starts to more effectively fight back and make some headway with a creative type of plan that only Miho and her comrades from Oarai could have come up with in order to take out the Carl. And while the battle was far from smooth sailing even after that, that's the point where there's enough of a shift to demonstrate that Oarai has a chance. But the more formal turning point, and the point at which the girls, Miho in particular, figures out how they have to approach this, comes just after the Carl is taken out, as they take stock of their losses, but also acknowledge that surviving the first engagement at all is a good sign for their odds, thanks to their teamwork utilizing the different styles and tanks in ways that best fits them. Everyone is taking account for what's happened, including Nishi, and this is technically the very start of where things start to change for her school, but that's a discussion for another time. Miho here is finally coming into her own as leader of this team, acknowledging the mistakes made so far, and with the help of Maho's encouragement, plus the confidence the others have in her, Miho is able to stop feeling so self-conscious and sorry for herself, so she can give orders that best fit this mishmash of a team. It can be made to work, but they need to play to their unique strengths, and not try and face their opponent at their strongest. As Maho says in response to Erika's second attempt at a witty remark, a makeshift team of disparate allies with different skills, approaches, and technology is still very much a team. The strength of one part of the team can cover the weaknesses of another, they can combine their skills in unique ways to impact the larger battle, etc. Just like how in a real war, one's allies can be different in many ways, but good allies are ones who you can effectively work cooperatively with to accomplish that goal. And, after the technical analysis of this first part of the battle, we'll take a closer look at just how Miho and friends go about doing that. If you enjoyed this video and like to support me in what I do here, my books and light novels are all available on Amazon. And you can get early access to videos, sneak peeks, and updates on my upcoming military Maori manga and other projects by subscribing over on Patreon. I also offer channel memberships, which get you access to monthly members-only watch-along streams. And I'll be announcing soon what show I'll be watching next. And as always, if you have any thoughts on this video or is anything Girls and Panzer related you'd like me to talk about, definitely share them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear them, and while I might not get to respond to every comment, at least not in a timely manner, I can guarantee that I read each of them. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss any future uploads. That's all for now, so until next time.